morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the final term, a sit-down conversation with Mayor Ron Nirenberg. It is a moment in his tenure where we get to kind of pause and reflect on where you've been and where you'll be. This is a presentation with KLRN and the San Antonio Report. My name is Lee Munsell. I'm the editor-in-chief of the San Antonio Report. We are joined today by a live studio audience as well as virtually online. So we're going to get moving, but please first join me in welcoming Mayor Ron Nirenberg for this conversation. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time this morning. I actually looked it up, and almost exactly 10 years ago, you were being sworn into the San Antonio City Council for the first time, representing District 8. Now you're heading into your final term as mayor with a couple of new faces on the dais. So 3 terms down, 1 to go. I think our audience is probably most interested in looking forward, but I also want to spend a little bit of time today looking back. So my question to kick us off is, how fast did the first 3 terms go? When you came into the mayor's seat in 2017, your emphasis at the time was on public transportation needs, along with the need for a mayor to represent the entire city. Do you feel like you've accomplished what you set out to do in your first 3 terms?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Lee, and to KLRN and the San Antonio Report. Really appreciate the opportunity to have a discussion about the last few years of city government. I would say that, anyone who says that 6 years, mission accomplished, I think doesn't quite capture the nature of local government. The truth of the matter is this is a 300-plus-year-old city. The challenges that we have to work on and that we've committed ourselves to are fundamental. Things like economic mobility, which has been a common thread line of my time in office, are generational in nature. And so, my work and my focus is to make sure that we're making the fundamental decisions necessary and that we take the ball as far down the field as possible, because the truth of the matter is these efforts must continue long after I'm gone in order to make the impacts necessary to make San Antonio what I believe it can be and should be, which is one of the best cities in America.
Yeah. Obviously, no one could have anticipated or predicted how much the COVID-19 pandemic was going to change all of our lives over the past couple of years. In San Antonio, which had just come off a decade of downtown, in time to be walloped by business closures and an exodus of downtown office workers, the pandemic's timing had dramatic effects that are still ongoing.
Yeah.
So how much did the pandemic upend the city's plans since 2020? How have you had to prioritize?
Well, it's almost as if my time in the mayor's office has been in 3 phases: pre-pandemic, pandemic, and now, we call it post-pandemic, although we're still living in the long tail of the COVID era. I would say that the COVID pandemic itself was extremely disruptive. I mean, look at the challenges faced by everyday Americans and certainly families here in San Antonio, and one of the stories of that impact is that those who were on the margins, those who had stressors already, those stressors were exacerbated. And, I continually see the image of, William Luther, a photographer who took the image of our food bank lines that had doubled overnight, families in San Antonio who are now literally overnight relying on the food bank to put food on the table as a result of this disruption. That was an image of how fragile the American economy was, certainly exemplified here in San Antonio. And so that is the work that we began to focus on writ large in the country, although San Antonio's story has been told through this lens for a long time. In my first budget in office, we created the equity lens to start shifting the way we allocated resources to address this very issue. So, it was disruptive, but I think positive to come out of this is that the pandemic itself was a catalyst for transformative change. And while we sort of had the seeds of that change planted, the foundational changes that needed to occur in our San Antonio economy, the fact that we now have partnership at the federal level and sometimes even at the state level to make these shifts, to strengthen our community through economic mobility, through transformative infrastructure investment. That is now how we can look at the pandemic as not just being disruptive, but catalyzing opportunity.
Can you, that was interesting, the way you framed that. Can you give an example of a state partnership that's working?
Well, sure I can. And you know, we just lived through the 88th, and so, you know, want to give a bit of deference to the fact that that is also a robust discussion that happens in Austin. Unfortunately, we still live under one-party control, and regardless of whether that one party is yours or not, one-party control deadens the conversation and ultimately is not good for anybody. So with respect to, you know, state partnership, I'll tell you that we made it through the pandemic in part because of state partnership. We had assistance in opening up our vaccination facilities in response to the need for distribution of PPE. We had our state partners at the table. You know, in the early days of the pandemic, Governor Abbott and myself and the judge were at the same table planning in concert the response to the pandemic. We saw all across the country, not just here in the state, the politics of partisanship rear their head. And unfortunately, public health has taken a backseat to the advancement of people's political agendas and scoring points. The pandemic and people's lives were lost because of it. But, you know, there is good that happens at the state, and, you know, we need to uplift that, and we need to celebrate it when it occurs, and of course, we have to work through the challenges when it doesn't.
Great, yeah, thank you. I want to go back to downtown a little bit, and it seems that some of the vacancy issues we're seeing in office space has maybe not compounded safety concerns, but at least has added visibility to our city's issues with homelessness. And so I want to talk a little bit about what the experience is of someone who comes to San Antonio as a tourist or a local who wants to go downtown, and what do you want to see change about that experience right now?
Well, certainly, I think, number one, San Antonio has one of the most magical and unique downtowns in the country. And so we have assets to build from. Of course, the Riverwalk is one element of that. The historic structures and stories, part of our downtown is part of that. But we have had challenges, just like any other city, during the pandemic. And one of those challenges has been very visible chronic homelessness. And let me just say first, that we have an incredible homeless response system led by Katie Vell and the South Alamo Regional Alliance for Homeless here in San Antonio. And the population of homeless individuals, unsheltered, has not changed a whole lot, but the composition has. We're seeing a lot more economic distress, and we're seeing a lot more addiction and mental health issues. Now, what we have done is focus on what works and filling the gaps and resourcing the areas that we need to fill in terms of gaps. We passed a housing bond, which is extremely important. First ever affordable housing bond in San Antonio. A big portion of that went to permanent supportive housing, which is a big gap for us. That housing that has assisted services attached to it so folks can get off the street first, housing first, and then we can work on restitution and making sure that they stay off the street and then are transitioning into permanent housing. Another big area is that actually we have just begun to address, and we did that in part, I think 2 weeks ago at the City Council when we allocated some additional ARPA revenues, is low barrier shelter. There are folks, unsheltered homeless individuals who don't even qualify for permanent supportive housing because their needs and their functional disabilities are so acute. And so we need to have shelter available in spaces where they can be safe, and public safety is a big element of this, where they can be safe and get off the street. So there are gaps in the system that have to be filled. We're doing that. But I have to be very clear about this. One of the challenges of homelessness and the response to it is to get folks to understand that homelessness is not the cause of something, it's a symptom of other things. So in many cases, homelessness correlates to a rise in domestic violence. Homelessness is also extremely well correlated to our issues in mental health. a couple of things that have occurred in San Antonio that we really weren't paying a whole lot of attention to because we were in the midst of fighting a pandemic was the loss of the Nix Hospital downtown. A big part of the purveyance of mental health services, acute mental health services in our city. That hospital shut down in 2019. Months later, we were finding ourselves in a situation where everything was essentially closed, and our sheltered population was now quickly moved into non-congregate facilities, so off the street, so they could be safe from this disease. And so we didn't really see the impacts of it. Now that everything is opened up, we're starting to see the impact of the loss of those mental health facilities. And so I applaud the county for the work that they're doing now to help increase mental health bed capacity. We are doing our work on the other aspects of the homeless response system as well. But there's a whole range of services that we need to make sure that are being provided, and it's a local issue, it's a state issue, it's a federal issue, and I would say that we are not even close to adequately addressing and resourcing the mental health problem in this country. And so until we get to that point, we're going to be sort of, trying to stop the hole in the bucket.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, because we all know that the point-in-time count is not a perfect measure of what's actually going on with the city's homelessness issue. But it also is kind of one of the only measures that we have, at least right now. I know Haven for Hope is looking into doing some more data and deep dives into data, which is, I'm really interested to see that data, and I think hopefully it'll give us a better sense of what's going on. But maybe, I guess the question is, San Antonio has poured a lot of money into homelessness response over the past several years, and even before that. Obviously, the pandemic was a big factor in kind of the life cycle of this issue, but do we need to wait and see when those effects are going to happen in terms of starting to move the needle on homelessness?
I don't think we need to wait, because I believe, and I think you'll hear this from our homeless response system providers, that even with the augmented resources that we're providing, it's still not going to be enough. And so we're still going to be sort of chasing a bit on the issue. I will say that San Antonio has taken an all-of-the-above approach. Some cities, have eschewed the shelter model that Haven for Hope was lauded for nationally, and we still have delegations come to San Antonio to study Haven for Hope. It's one important part of the solution. The housing first elements are also important, though, so we've taken an all-of-the-above approach. Let's have everything in the toolbox available to tackle this issue. But I will say also, as challenging as it is, anyone who has been outside of San Antonio to look at what other cities are facing has come back to San Antonio and say, well, I'm glad we're in San Antonio. And that's not to rest on our laurels. It is to say, though, that we've got a model, we've got the property resource, and we've got to stay focused on it. San Antonio, just like I signed on to the House America initiative from the White House in mid-2021. It was a commitment to rehouse as many households. We set a goal of 1,500 households by the end of 22. We hit our goal by October, and we've far exceeded that now. But we hit our goal in October. We were the first city in the country to hit it. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Marcia Fudge, recognized San Antonio as the place where they're getting it right. Of course, this is a national problem, and we still have serious issues to address, but when you have the right path, you stick to the path and you try to put as much effort into it. And so I believe we've taken the right path. We've just got to properly resource everything.
Okay. I was going to ask about downtown on this, but I think I'd rather broaden it out to the whole city. Looking forward to your next 2 years, so when 2025 rolls around, what would you like to see different in San Antonio than it is right now?
Well, I want to see less orange cones.
You think there's going to be less in 2025?
Well, more coordinated orange cone activity.
There we go.
We've had some challenges, and some of those are supply and labor disruptions, but we need to get more efficient and effective in scheduling of construction projects. And the city manager and I have talked about that quite a lot, and he's focused on that. Yeah, there's going to be some big projects going on, but there's several things that I want to see happening in San Antonio at the time. Of course, we're going to be knee-deep in the terminal construction. I'm calling it Terminal Alpha right now because we don't have a name for it, but it's going to be the modern airport facility that the city has deserved for at least 40 years. ART, Advanced Rapid Transit, which is legitimate mass transit for San Antonio, first time ever, is going to be underway with construction, our north-south line. I also am hoping to see us very close to beginning construction on the east-west as well, so the backbone of our advanced rapid transit system will be underway. But, you know, I would say, Lee, the most important fundamental things that I want to see different in San Antonio, and by the time I'm leaving, is the momentum that has been created around economic mobility. Believe it or not, the Brookings Institute measures socioeconomic disparity, which we know San Antonio, unfortunately, this has been a plague. I mean, socioeconomic disparity, generational poverty. You know, we have made a concerted effort to provide pathways to education and career development through training. We need to stick to that. That's really important. The other leg of that stool, of course, is housing. And we've talked a lot about the housing development. We can talk more about the other aspects beyond homelessness. Third leg of that stool is transportation. So this whole notion of equity is to ensure that we are creating economic mobility in our city, the anchor that's been around this city for so long. And you remember in 1968, neither one of us were born, but in 1968, there was a documentary created called Hunger in America. San Antonio was the poster child of that kind of urban poverty. Mm-hmm. Flash forward to 2020, we saw the images of the pandemic shown through San Antonio's lens. Nothing has changed. We have to change that if we're going to be a city where everyone can thrive, and that's the work we've been dedicated to doing. And so, you know, as I see it, what I want to ensure is that we are continuing to see that momentum built on economic mobility. And I started by saying the Brookings Institute tracks this. From the period 2007 to 11 to the period 2017 to 21, we were number one in closing the socioeconomic disparity gap in the country. Mm-hmm. And so we are on the right track. We've got to continue to focus on creating opportunity for folks, economic mobility, and that is the key to long-term success and economic prosperity for the city. I am confident that we are getting there, and that's what I want to see continue as I leave office.
Yeah, and where do you think that could get to by 2025? Like, is there a number, goal that you've set for yourself in terms of trying to close the gaps on poverty?
Well, you know, there's a lot of ways of looking at that. We're going to be sort of in the third quarter of our housing effort. I want to see us hit our goals on housing. The Ready to Work program, along with our other workforce development efforts, but specifically Ready to Work, is now starting to gain momentum. We've got 3,000 plus folks enrolled. We're beginning to see many of them finish and being placed into jobs. We've got to continue that effort. For the last 6 years, in 2016, during the economic boom here in San Antonio, our median income dropped. For the last 6 years, including the pandemic, we've seen median income rise in San Antonio. I want to see that continue. That ultimately is going to create the generational opportunity, the familial wealth that we have lacked in our city. I would say another effort that I would like to see, and this can be tracked in numbers, is the participation of small minority and women-owned businesses in the big procurement opportunities that are happening here. That's a small measure, but think about it this way. Over the next 10 years, there's going to be $9 billion of public dollars, federal, state, and local, contracted here in San Antonio. If we can get more local businesses participating in those contracting opportunities, that's dollars that'll stay in San Antonio. Those are dollars that are going to fund somebody's education. Those are dollars that are going to pay somebody's mortgage here in San Antonio and create familial, generational wealth that we have been lacking.
Wow. Do you feel like you've put a process in place so that local businesses can be eligible as much as possible for those contracts?
Yes. Okay. We're getting even better. San Antonio has had for the last 2 decades a small business, small women minority-owned business protocol in place through aspirational goals meant to address disparities in contracting. And we have been one of the models to make progress in this area. But we have called together, Judge Wolf and I convened, Judge Sakai now, and have appointed former Mayor Henry Cisneros to work with 13 different local procurement agencies, all public entities. San Antonio, Bexar County, VIA, SAWS, CPS, all of these major public procurement entities to start working on a single umbrella, a single front door, so that we can have one place. If you're a small business in San Antonio, you want to access a public contracting opportunity, one front door. Today, we have 13. We have 13 different processes. We've got lots of different technical, minutia that you have to go through. Most firms don't have the time. They don't have the expertise. They certainly don't have the resources to go through this. So we're gonna open up those opportunities for more firms here, and that'll keep dollars local.
Great. Yeah, I'll ask you about that in 2 years, and we'll see.
It's called Supply SA. We can talk about it anytime.
Yeah, great. That's so interesting. On Sunday, our business reporter, Tracy Adele Hamilton, reported that the Ready to Work program is about to face a critical test, with nearly 1,400 people set to complete their training or degree and begin job hunting in the next 6 months. As of June 21st, 440 people have completed training, according to Ready to Work's dashboard. Of those, 162 have reported finding jobs. Those numbers are far below the originally stated intentions of the taxpayer-approved workforce development program. But what is your pitch to San Antonians who are worried about the program's progress so far?
No, and it's fair, and we've got to continue to bird dog this. And so I will say that we have tweaked several things along the way. We've made improvements, and Mike Ramsey is doing an incredible job in coordinating all these different activities with employers at the front end, telling us in the real world what jobs are available and what jobs are being created, so we can make sure that San Antonians are being trained so they can fill those jobs, and we don't have to import talent. So a couple things. One, this is a taxpayer, voter-approved project. The dollars that are spent on this project are not spent until we actually get a participant through the pipeline. So the $183 million that have been contracted have not been spent until we actually get folks trained and into jobs. Second thing I'd say is that we do have some challenges to get all those contractors, the training providers and the career navigators, all coordinated. And I believe we do have a bit of a tracking drop-off. The 440 or so folks that have completed the training, we've got to make sure that we don't say, okay, you got your certification and you're into a job, we don't hear from you. We've got to make sure we continue to track those individuals. I think what we're going to find is a lot of folks are getting the certification, they're good to go, and they're getting, they're going to apply for jobs and getting placed. We need to stay with them, because part of the commitment to Ready to Work is to stay with the individual into the first year of their career, because it's not only hard skills, it's soft skills as well. We want them to be successful in their career development. But I would say this, Lee, yes, we want this to be a robust effort, and already it's the largest workforce development program in terms of numbers of participants that we've ever had. But think about it this way. I mentioned before that we were the face of hunger in America in 1968. The average participant in Ready to Work, the profile of the average participant in Ready to Work is a single mother of color raising children in a household earning less than $19,000 a year. That person is much more likely to have to work an additional 2 or 3 jobs just to put food on the table. Now, statistically speaking, their children, her children, are going to grow up with diminished educational attainment, lack of career opportunity, and therefore on public assistance, likely living under poverty, raising their own children in poverty. This is the cycle of generational poverty. This is why it builds exponentially over time. And so think about it this way. We get one family who now is earning a living wage or better. It's actually, the average increase is almost $20,000 a year. Now that child that's being raised in that household has a parent at home helping with homework. Their educational prospects have now gone to career development. They are no longer in poverty. Their children are now in the same situation, also living with career opportunity and economic mobility. The impact of that one household over a series of generations, I mean, you're talking about a whole street changing in terms of the number of people that impacts. Now, you talk about doing that for 10 households. I mean, you're talking about now in generations, a neighborhood has changed. Now think about doing that, switching, changing, reversing the cycle of generational poverty for 100 families in San Antonio. 1,000? This is why over the next series of years, as we do spend down this money and reverse the cycle of generational poverty, which is happening, if you talk to the people, not just count the widgets, if you talk to the folks, this is what's happening. And that's why Ready to Work and our workforce development efforts, while they are so intensive, are so critically important if we want to do something about poverty in San Antonio. I'm not going to be here as mayor and look at our poverty numbers coming in the door and say, oh well, can't do anything about it. If I'm going to place a bet, I'm going to place a bet on the ingenuity and initiative of the San Antonio family who wants to change that. And so that's why Ready to Work is important. That's why we're going to get this right, and that's why we have no choice but to get it right.
Great. Thank you very much. I think that people are interested in what the pitch is, what the talking points are, and also the thought behind the program. And it's going to be a case that you'll have to keep making, I think.
Oh, sure. And I'm happy to do it. And this is part of our economic competitiveness pitch for the city of San Antonio as well. Go to any city in the country. The conversation right now is about talent development. Do the businesses that are there that want to grow have the talent to fill the jobs that they're going to create? Most cities at this point are unsure at best. And so we in San Antonio have put our money where our mouths are and are now creating a economic competitiveness edge when it comes to talent development. So this is important for employment. This is important for our business community. This is one of the reasons why when the White House says we need to work on workforce development, they come to San Antonio and say, this is what we need to do. In fact, we just got recruited by the White House and the National League of Cities to start drilling down into apprenticeship, attach our Ready to Work program to in-employment training so that we can continue to hone on this. This is a San Antonio issue acutely, but it's an American issue as well. And so San Antonio is continuing to lead the way.
Great. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask, we talked a little bit about state relationships, but I want to talk about the federal relationship a little bit too. We've reported that specifically on public transportation that VIA's Advanced Rapid Transit Plan relies heavily on the prospect of federal money. It was included in the president's fiscal year 2023 budget, and construction on the north-south line is expected to begin in 2025, be completed by 2027. And if VIA receives a federal match for a second segment of the project, that would happen around then or after. So that's all still a ways out. Do you think that those plans can withstand an administration change?
Yes, I do. And because it's in the FTA budget, once that money's appropriated, it's delivered, or it's scheduled for delivery, and will now not have to be subject to additional congressional dialogue. Now, the north-south line is already done. It's fully funded. We have the local match. We have the operational dollars. It's all made possible again by the vote of the public in 2020. For the Keep San Antonio Moving program. Now, east-west, we have a little gap that we are working with the county and VIA to make sure it gets filled, but it's in the president's budget as well. And so as soon as we can prove up that local match, it goes from the FDA ready to, on deck circle, and then finally moving it around the bases. So we're going to get that done. I'm highly confident in that. We are actually ahead of schedule from pre-pandemic. I remember some pretty tough conversations with VIA that I had called. We had even TxDOT at the table and Sarah and fist pounding on the table a little bit because it was such a long-term, uncertain revenue forecast, especially in an era where we didn't have the BIL, we didn't have congressionally appropriated funds, infrastructure law was merely a pipe dream. Now all of that has happened, and we are going to take advantage.
Thanks for that. Last year on the City Council, you oversaw the censure of two colleagues, Clayton Perry and Mario Bravo, and accepted the resignation of a longtime colleague, Anna Sandoval, who accepted a higher paying job at University Health. From your perspective, what are the lessons learned from the censure votes? And are there any changes being put in place to avoid the behavior issues that led to those votes of no confidence?
You know, I think a couple lessons that have been learned with regard to censure is that the City Council doesn't have the authority to hire or fire. Only the voters of San Antonio do that. And so the censure was one way we could demonstrate that certain behavior was not becoming of a public official, that we can expect more. And so we've had a lot of conversations, internal conversations about conduct and what we expect from one another, but you know, it ebbs and flows over the years. I would say that voters ultimately have to make the determination of you know, what they expect from elected officials, but I was very proud of the fact that we acted swiftly in each of those, or both of those cases, in terms of saying that these are things that you know, aren't appropriate, and you should expect more from elected officials.
Got it. Speaking to former Councilwoman Sandoval's, her stated intention or reason behind the fact that she switched off the council was because of the low pay. Sometimes in a mayor's last term, it's a rare opportunity to take a look at council pay, mayor pay, city manager pay. What's your plan on those counts? Yeah,
well, and I will say that I'm the first mayor to serve 4 terms in quite a while, and so I've seen a lot of permutations of charter changes over the last few years. So I will be calling together a charter review commission, which is part of an ordinance that was created for this very purpose, probably after the budget, to have that public dialogue, and we'll go from there. There's a lot of things that have been discussed, including possibly increasing the number of terms, increasing the number of districts. Yeah, don't want that headline.
Just in time for you.
Yeah, sorry. Definitely not that. You certainly wouldn't pass the household test on that one. So increasing the number of districts. We did do a redistricting process for the council. I've talked about an independent ethics authority for the city, which I think would be appropriate, but ultimately this is the domain of the City Charter Commission, a Charter Review Commission, and they'll be discussing those things. I will say, just in my perspective, I came in when there was no council pay. It was very challenging, and thankfully we have 2 household earners. It was very challenging. That change to now have an actual council salary has allowed a lot of folks to access this job that weren't before. And so that's an important discussion. You know, if it's 50 years until we change that again, we're going to close the door again on a lot of folks who are willing to serve this community and not able to.
So how significantly could you see those pays increase? I mean, obviously that's for the commission, but would you recommend anything particularly?
So that'll all be discussed. I'm not taking positions right now just because, again, the council has to authorize the Charter Review Commission. We'll put that together. But certainly as the discussions unfold, I'll make my feelings known. This is a very important process. It's not taken lightly. There are contours of the city charter that I think need to be reviewed. And that'll be happening shortly, again, probably after the budget is put to bed.
Great. I have some questions I just want to hit pretty quick, and you can kind of rattle off a couple examples or however you want to take them, though. But I just want to ask, what have you not accomplished so far in office that you'd like to see happen before your term's complete?
Stay tuned.
Okay. How soon?
Well, it's 2 years, but no, I would say that the things that we're doing right now that are transformative, I want to make sure get done. When I came into office, the big infrastructure conversation was transportation, and so the mass transit plan is significant. It's extremely important. We've got to do that. The other aspect of that, of course, is the airport. We needed a housing plan. We are now, going into, I believe, year 4 of the housing strategy. Prior to me coming into office, all this was laid clear after the SA Tomorrow plan was put together. One of the aspects that we have not gotten done, I think, well enough is having those two things talk to each other. The planning effort in the city of San Antonio is important, and right now we're still seeing a cycle of sprawl continue. And that's challenging all aspects of infrastructure and services. And so we're going through a growth management discussion right now so it can inform decisions at CPS and SAWS and at the city. But largely the work that's in place right now, we need to continue to keep moving. And then there's some important and exciting developments that will be underway shortly.
Okay. How are you prioritizing what to tackle first over the next 2 years?
You don't get to. Everything goes at the same time.
Oh.
Like I said, all those big things, those are major initiatives. One that we have not talked about, though, is public safety. Yeah. And, public safety is an issue that has ebbed and flowed over the years, and we are seeing that happen in all the other cities around the country. I do believe San Antonio is doing the right thing. We're having a sober analysis based on data and how we can augment our policing services, but also make it more robust in terms of comprehensive public safety discussions. We have our SA core teams with regard to mental health, and we've got to make sure that we're also addressing upstream issues on public safety, and that's the work that we're going to be doing with UTSA, dealing with infrastructure and services related to youth and youth empowerment.
Yeah, public safety and crime, I think, were probably the most commonly raised topics of conversation during the municipal elections this year. It's certainly on a lot of voters' minds. One of the things that you have talked about on the city side is the possibility of adding new police officers over the next 3 to 5 years. And as part of that discussion, you actually suggested that the city's policy of keeping public safety spending below 66% of the general fund is perhaps not a useful number anymore. Is that still something you believe?
So this is the reason why I said it. When we were in the midst of our impasse in the collective bargaining cycle two contracts ago, we had public safety expenses, mainly related to benefits, rising 2.5 times faster than city revenues. That's unsustainable. That's why it was a significant concern in this community that we address that issue. And that's why it was so challenging, but we finally got it done. At this point, and I will tell you, that's why people say it was crowding out other aspects of services, because as we had to allocate additional resources to address the rise in costs over there, we couldn't invest those other revenues in basic services like infrastructure. In fact, when I got to council, we were our infrastructure maintenance budget, our streets maintenance budget, was $34 million a year. Today, it's 110. So we were crowding out other funds. In the midst of that, we said, okay, it's 66% of general revenue being spent in that area now. We've got to say, we've got to cap it by policy and make adjustments because this is unsustainable. That was one tool that we went into the negotiations with. So now we have structural balance in our public safety budgets. As we've seen, we're starting to see a normalization now of the budget where we can invest in infrastructure, invest in services, and properly invest in increasing public safety in accordance with our population growth and the needs for services. So it's fine, but we've actually seen that number start to decline. And so I go into budget discussions, and I've been through, 10 now, and so I continually hear this number, 66%, as if it's a budget 2 number. It's not. It was just scoring the high water mark. And so my thought was, it's almost irrelevant at this point. Let's make sure we're healthfully investing in our community, all the other aspects of our city to make sure it's a healthy, well city. And then we will certainly be able to make sure that we're investing in public safety in proportion to the needs of this community. So let's stop worrying about the 66%. It certainly was not intended to say that we should go above it or that we're trying to hit some arbitrary number below it either. It's just that if we're just budgeting to a number, we're missing the point. And so my suggestion now is we have to do what I said we were going to do when I came into office in 2017. We've got to increase the personnel in the police department. That was one of the things that I promised that we would do, and we have increased it over the years. But as a result of some analysis that we've had done by UTSA in our desire to switch from 60-40 reactive, proactive policing to 40-60, we're going to now add some additional resources, significant resources in our patrol division that will also help with, issues related to the stressors involved with the job. So we're going to continue to go through that, and I do fully support that.
Great. This is just, we've had a couple fun
Sorry,
weeks.
that wasn't a short answer.
No, it's a good one. I just was trying to decide whether to drill down on that because there's so much more to ask there, but I don't know that there's anything specific that we need to delve into right this second on it, but I'll follow up if I have any questions. I wanted to ask you, because it's been a fun couple weeks in San Antonio, obviously tourism is a huge piece of what makes San Antonio's economy tick, and now the San Antonio Spurs are more closely aligned with Bexar County in terms of oversight and governmental responsibility. It's not exactly your space all the time, but I do have to ask you about Wemby.
Things are looking up.
Well, how would you estimate the economic impact of a #1 NBA draft pick? Does the city have any plans to capitalize on the excitement surrounding this moment for the Spurs?
It's almost incalculable, and we have proof of performance in that when Tim was drafted and when David was drafted. So, the economic impact, I think we'll understand over time, and certainly that is a direct benefit to the Spurs, but when the Spurs succeed, we succeed. And there's going to be a ton of indirect benefit. One of the things I'm looking forward to is all of a sudden, the sports world and the world generally following the sports world has been sleeping on our city, not really paying close attention. All of a sudden, we're the center of the sports universe now. People are going to start to get to know our city again. And meanwhile, we've been making all these important investments and moves, improving our city in so dramatic ways. I'm excited for people to get to know San Antonio again. So I'm very excited. I think capitalize on it is probably the wrong way to look at it. It's more we are going to mutually benefit from this, and I think our moment is now. Like all the stars are aligned. And I said at the beginning, I remember being on one of the radio shows, and we were speculating about this draft pick, and I said, look, we know the Spurs are rebuilding. Just go out there and play your hardest. Don't throw games. We just want the basketball gods to be pleased with us. And I love what Peter Holt said. Good things happen to good people. It's exactly what happened. And we are all going to benefit from this, believe me, and look forward in the next 20 years.
Okay. It's a little early for this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you want your legacy, the Nirenberg legacy, to be in San Antonio?
I let other people worry about the legacy thing. I never set out to be in politics. My dream job is still to be, or was, and maybe still is, to be the beat writer for the Boston Red Sox. I'm a big baseball fan. But I got into this because my wife and I started a family, and I really started to get interested. I had some background in municipal policy research. I was at the Nirenberg Public Policy Center for a number of years. But I was interested in people falling in love with the city, which I experienced, and what the future of the city held. And I wanted to do everything I could to be, to pour myself into making that future great. And that's what I've done. So that's what I've been working on. And I do believe that this city over the last, 4 or 5 years has been through an inflection point. My favorite quote is a quote about the arc of the moral universe. It's long, but it bends towards justice, and I've always been interested in those who do the bending. And, there's a lot of people in this city that qualify for that. And if I can be one of those, that's what I want that's what I want to do. And in my view, the issues related to poverty and economic mobility are the most profound, and that's what I've spent my time doing.
Okay. If you had to give yourself a letter grade for your performance in office so far, what would it be?
I'm going to steal the quote from Phil Hardberger on that one and say I. It's incomplete.
Okay. That's fine.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you.
That's a good answer. I have to ask, and I'm going to actually really push you for an answer. We know you're focused on the needs of San Antonio right now for one more term, so I'll just take that answer off the table. Don't give me that one. But you have to have put some thought into where your political career might take you next. For example, the experience that comes with Blue City, red state public service has plenty of value in Washington, as the Castros, Henry Cisneros, Ray Saldana, and others have shown. What sort of next step role do you think would be a good fit for you after you finish your time as mayor?
I really don't think about that stuff. You know, 2025 will get here soon enough. And, you know, granted, I love the work that we're doing, and I feel like I'm doing meaningful work in the city. And, you know, I love the opportunity to continue that work. I know I'm termed out, but I believe people make mistakes when they get ahead of themselves in politics, and so I'm going to stay focused on the job. You know, and I'm sure a lot of people won't believe it from me because I am in politics, but that's the God's honest truth.
Great. One other thing I wanted to talk about, which we didn't talk about at the beginning of today, but today is actually the one-year anniversary of the deaths of 53 migrants in the sweltering heat in an 18-wheeler found on the south side, which is considered to be the deadliest human smuggling event in U.S. history. Obviously, San Antonio doesn't set federal immigration policy, but we're affected by it and have to respond to it. For you, what are the takeaways from that tragedy, and what can SAPD or other San Antonio entities do to try to keep an eye out for other victims of human smuggling and make sure a tragedy of that magnitude never happens here again?
Well, first of all, that was a devastating moment for our community. Unfortunately, it's not a unknown feeling because we've been through that before. It's just that the scale of the tragedy was so profound. I do want to thank you know, the Archbishop, my colleagues, particularly Councilmember Rocha Garcia, for really helping our city cope through this. You know, a lot of takeaways from that. First, the people that passed away were people. You know, they had families. Their families were, in many cases, wondering, you know, when they were going to get the call that they had made it. They were trying to seek a better life. So, you know, the politics of immigration and the system of immigration in this country are clearly broken. This city is a confluence of cultures, and we are a compassionate city. And we remembered that and recognized that on my very first day in office with the Charter for Compassion. In fact, just yesterday, we did a local launch of Compassionate USA, which is intended, it's a campaign to teach the skills of compassion, help people, you know, understand that it's within them and also exercise those abilities and skill sets. And it's a gift from San Antonio to the world. But our approach in San Antonio, despite the fact that we can't solve the immigration crisis, is to make sure that we treat people with compassion. When you get here, it's not our job to ask for your papers. Our job is to ask how we can help. And if we see someone in distress, the compassionate thing to do is to try to ease that distress. We can have discussions about the immigration policy issue, and that should happen. But our job is to make sure where there is humanitarian need in our community, we work with the community to address it. And I want to thank the faith community, obviously, Catholic Charities, Raices, a lot of different organizations and individuals help and support. Now, there is policy decision baked into what we do locally, and the Migrant Resource Center was open. I will say I'm very proud of that, because that is a compassionate response to the immigration challenge that we experienced locally. That itself is not going to fix immigration. Unfortunately, that is the byproduct of the system, but it's a local solution that allows us to treat people with humanitarianly or compassionately, and it also minimizes the disruption that would occur if we didn't have it. I mean, again, asylum seekers are coming here. They're getting dropped off here. They're on their way to be with their sponsor families or wherever their hearing is going to be, but they're here. And so if our approach is hands off, there's going to be disruption. And there has been prior to us opening the Migrant Resource Center. And prior to that, we had the model with the bus depot downtown. We had that was a solution to the disruption. But this is how we can be compassionate towards others, and we'll again advocate for the solutions in policy.
We wrote this week about a group of Southside resident volunteers who are maintaining a makeshift memorial along Quintana Road where the truck was found. The city's Office of Cultural Affairs is expected to have an update in August on a proposed price and timeline for a permanent memorial project.
Yeah.
Is that something you want to see happen before you leave office?
I do, yeah, and I'll fully support it. The scale of that tragedy was, almost unfathomable. And it happened here in our city, and for a moment in time, they were in San Antonio under our sky. And to remember them and to honor the tragedy, to honor their lives in the midst of that tragedy, I think is important. And again, we're all one human family. The fact that they may have originated somewhere else is immaterial to the fact that the tragedy occurred here.
Yeah. Thank you for that answer. I think that's something that a lot of citizens care about and want to see movements on. Last thing I want to ask, the city is growing, the county is growing. It's inevitable that growth, even beyond what we've seen already in San Antonio, is coming for San Antonio. You kind of talked earlier about San Antonio having a moment. How do you anticipate managing growth over the next 2 years?
It'll be a challenge, and a lot of people say, stop asking them to come here. It's not really that we're doing that. It's just we're building a great city. People want to be part of it, and businesses are growing, and there's opportunity here, so people will come. And how we manage that is very important. I mentioned, we have some, in some cases we have one, if not two hands tied behind our back in terms of how we can plan and manage that growth, but investment in infrastructure is extremely important. We've got to recognize, though, that we can't simply build our way out of the challenges of growth, and I'm speaking specifically about transportation. We've got to develop alternative modes of transportation, and we've got to protect green space. If we do it right, green space becomes modes of transportation, and we've seen that with the Creekway Trail system. We've also got to make sure that we are accelerating our housing plan, and the way we can accelerate it beyond resources, that we can really drill down into the policies that we have that in some cases cost time and money or prevent people from being eligible for accessing the resources that we do have to preserve and produce housing. That's another area. Then it's the human element. I'm telling you, Lee, we've got to stay focused on making sure that people have access to education, because when people get here, they're not bringing their jobs. In some cases we have businesses create jobs here, and put jobs here, but we're getting an influx of people. So we've got to make sure we stay laser focused on the housing cost burden in San Antonio. And there are two elements of that: cost of housing, cost of living, but also the wages that people are making. If we simply attack one side of that or the other, we're going to fall behind. We are doing both, and that's required. But we've got to stay focused on making sure that people can afford to live here, cost of living, as we invest in the other elements. And then, quality of life is a big part of that, and those are the big developments that we're talking about, and some of the amenities that you've seen develop.
Great. Well, we're almost done. Is there anything else we didn't get to talk about today that you want to make sure you can talk directly to the citizens on?
I think we covered a lot.
Really
I do want to say thank you to my wife and my son for tolerating this life for the last 10 years. We've tracked my time in office two ways: my hair and my son's height. And he was 3 years old when I started, just about, and now he's a 15-year-old I couldn't be more proud of. And so I love them both, and I wouldn't be able to do it without them.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Let's thank the mayor for being here and for this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. This has been the final term, a conversation with Mayor Ron Nirenberg and the San Antonio Report in conjunction with KLRN, our wonderful partners. Thank you so much for joining us, and for our virtual audience for joining us also for this conversation. And we'll wrap here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lee. Appreciate it.